In this video, we'll be comparing today's severe weather threat with tomorrow's severe weather threat to analyze which one can be a lot more significant and which one could possibly be an outbreak here. So whether it's going to be today's in the Central Plains or tomorrow's for portions of Western Dixie Valley. So we're going to be seeing exactly which one can be more severe. Both can be overnight threats, whether it's tonight or tomorrow night. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing throughout this video. But without further ado, let's get into it, the forecast. But before we get into the forecast, I would recommend you guys do subscribe to the channel because I would really appreciate that. I'm going to be streaming actually this evening and possibly even tomorrow evening. So that stream will be out possibly by maybe 6:30 Eastern time. So if you guys want to get coverage and discussion on the severe weather for the next 2 days or so, I would recommend subscribing so you guys can get notified when I make that live stream here, when I do coverage for severe weather throughout the whole season. And as well, if you guys really enjoy the video, I would recommend you guys do hit the like button, of course, as well. That really allow for me to know how many people like this type of video so I can continue to do them. But without further ado, let's get into the forecast. So here's a look now at today's severe weather threat. So of course we do have a slight risk for portions of these much of the central and eastern portion of Kansas here that actually has moved a bit more north compared to yesterday's update here, or yesterday's day 2, which was actually this is day 2 at this time, but it has now moved a little bit more north towards Nebraska and even including the far northwest from Missouri there and just towards the tip there of the border with Iowa. So that does include around 2.5 million people in that slight risk here, including Wichita, Overland, Kansas City, Topeka, and Olathe. So kind of much of Kansas region and just outside of Lincoln and as well Omaha City. So in the margin, of course, we do have areas like Omaha, Tulsa, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Kansas City. So we do actually have a very widespread marginal risk. So we're going to be seeing some scattered severe storms outside the slight risk before and after this main event here, which will kind of happen towards late this night or late this evening here, near midnight as well. So it's going to be a very small lasting event due to the cap, but we still do have that slight risk there. Tornado threat is still at a 2% chance, so we do still have a chance for tornadoes, but they're going to be if anything, we're seeing some very scattered and very little tornadoes within this event here as a result of that small time frame where the cap will, I guess, minimize. Wind threat, of course, is going to be the biggest threat as with the hail, both at a 15% chance. Let's now take a look now at tomorrow's threat, and tomorrow does seem to be the main event here. Tomorrow night or tomorrow evening, similar times, but just a different day. So we have even more watch for slight risk here, which is extended into Alabama, and it's extended further into northern Arkansas. So now around 7 million people are under this slight risk for tomorrow night, including Memphis, Freeport, Little Rock, Jackson, Mississippi, and Longview, Texas. So all over from Texas to portions of western Alabama and portions of western Tennessee, as well as very large margins as well, even up into the Midwest for tomorrow night and tomorrow afternoon. So we do actually have some more scattered severe storms as far north as the Iowa region, Nebraska. So it's going to be very scattered, but obviously the main event will be kind of more towards Dixie Valley and western Dixie Valley. Here we do have a 5% chance for tornadoes, so this one definitely has a better chance to bring in some scattered tornadoes. Definitely won't be a tornado outbreak, but in general, it is going to be more significant than today's based on what the SPC is showing here. So 5% chance, including Memphis, Shreveport, Little Rock, Jackson, and Longview, Texas, and a very widespread 2% chance. So even some small chances for tornadoes as far north as the upper Midwest. So got to keep a close eye for those regions. And of course, we do have a 15% chance for winds and hail. And there is a good chance that one of these wind or hail could very well become a 30%. So there is definitely a chance for an enhanced risk for this event when it comes to possibly areas like Mississippi there, Louisiana, even Arkansas. Got to keep a close eye on those regions. Those regions there, if there is an enhanced risk, it most likely will be issued for those areas. And if there is an enhanced risk, it should be issued by tonight, if not even tomorrow morning here. So keeping a very close eye on the SPC, whether they issue an enhanced or not. So here's look now at the HRRR here for today's event here. So getting into around the 5 o'clock time frame, 5 o'clock, or actually this is 5:30, I believe, Eastern time. We're going to start seeing some storms developing. Actually, I believe this might be Central Time. I'm not exactly sure. I think this might be Central Time. So 5:30 Central Time, we're going to start seeing some scattered storms across the portions of Minnesota there towards the Minneapolis and St. Paul region. And then we're going to be seeing some scattered rain here. This really won't be too severe because obviously we do have a very significant cold front towards the west here. We got snow into portions of western South Dakota, western Nebraska, and much of Wyoming here. So just to the different part of these states here, we'll be seeing completely different scenario here. Once we get down to 7 o'clock, I believe, Eastern time, or I can't tell if it's Central Eastern time, but around 7 o'clock here, we're going to start seeing some storms developing across Nebraska, Kansas, and these are going to be the ones that will be severe here, of course, not tornadic, because of the really high cap, going to keep away that tornadic potential. And there is going to be very little severe storms here today. There is going to be some very significant ones, but it's going to be very limited here across Nebraska and portions of northern Kansas here. They really won't last that extremely long, like hours and hours long. But we will have some significant storms across Nebraska and northern Kansas, and maybe some scattered storms across Minnesota, Iowa, and South Dakota, because in those areas we're going to be seeing a lot less cap. So there, oops, I did not want to do that. Let's go back to the, let's actually go back. Where were we? We were in the North Plains. No, actually, I can't find where we were. Oh, Upper Midwest. No, we were not there either. That is great. Now I can't find where we were. Okay, I found it. So it's actually the North Central. So going back here, we're going to be seeing some severe storms as late as 10 o'clock here across Iowa, there, Kansas, Nebraska, and even some scattered storms possibly that could be severe warned based on maybe some winds as far north as Minnesota. So today will be potential very widespread. Obviously, we're going to have a small area where it'll be a lot more severe, like Nebraska and Kansas, but we will have a pretty widespread threat for some severe thunderstorms, even as far north as Iowa, Minnesota, and even South Dakota. Let's now look at the main area that we're going to be watching for some severe weather. So I'm going to get some severe storms as early as 6:45 developing across Nebraska here. This could very well be the first actual severe thunderstorms for this event. And this will continue by even 8 o'clock here, starting to see some severe storms developing across north central Kansas, as well even in west central Nebraska, and even some more storms developing across those areas where we do have a slight risk here. So going to keep a close eye on that severe weather. And now getting around 8:45, 9 o'clock, those storms are going to continue to be very widespread there across Nebraska and even down there in central Kansas. But again, these won't be tornadic, and it won't be like multiple supercells at a time here because of the high cap. So a lot of this event and a lot of the potential of this event will be very well limited here. And then by 10 o'clock, 10:30, we will still have some scattered severe thunderstorms, but they really won't be extremely severe at this point. And even scattered small little cells that could develop across eastern Nebraska. So going to keep a close eye on that. Obviously, it's very far, not very far out, but still very hard to give you close details on this because of the cap and exactly where the cap's going to be. And once we get around 1-3 a.m., these will be most likely linear storms, bringing in some wind threats and as well some hail threats. So these definitely won't be extremely severe, and those will make their way towards the Ozarks by tomorrow, tomorrow morning. And then, of course, tomorrow evening is when those severe storms will be back in an extremely severe manner and bring some hail, possibly some scattered tornadoes, and some winds towards western Dixie Valley. Let's go ahead and now check a look at the Cape values here for this event. And as we now get towards, let me actually back up just a little bit. Sorry, guys. My morning voice is still here. So going around 6 o'clock is kind of just before those severe storms start to, I guess, those actual severe thunderstorms that we're looking for will start to blow up or start to develop by around 7 o'clock. So this is just an hour before the severe thunderstorms actually develop here. So we're going to be seeing some really high Cape values, possibly anywhere from 2,000 to possibly even 2,600 joules per kilogram. So seeing some pretty favorable conditions for some severe weather development. And even up there into the areas where we have that marginal, such as Iowa, Minnesota, even up to Wisconsin, we do actually get some pretty good numbers of over 1,000 joules per kilogram. So definitely going to be the reason why we have that very widespread marginal risk. As we now get later to 8 o'clock here, we're kind of be watching for these areas. We do have some pretty good Cape values, of course, up to possibly surpassing 2,500 joules per kilogram. So definitely very good, especially specifically for central Kansas and far southern Nebraska, where we do have the slight risk. And by 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, all of those Cape values will really die off. And by 1 a.m., they'll be kind of completely gone at that point. But look at the shear here. So we are going to be seeing some really favorable amount of shear. So there we got a low pressure there. It's going to bring in some really high amount of shear on the southern side of that low pressure. kind of a little jet stream. We're going to be seeing up to possibly over 40 knots of shear here. You got 41.1 across. This is going to be around 4 o'clock, so just a few hours before the main event. And then once we get to around 6 o'clock, so kind of an hour before, we're going to start seeing numbers still around 40 knots here. So 40 knots could be around 45, 46 mile an hour gust, or not gust, sorry, shear. I don't know why I say gust. That's going to kind of be mainly towards the, where we have the slight risk there for southeastern Nebraska and actually portion of central Kansas, kind of right here. It's kind of where we have the slight risk, and that's where we see, I guess, our most amount of shear, just under 40 knots. And it's going to be toward the, towards the surface here, and then we may actually get later by 9 o'clock here. We're going to be seeing well over now, possibly even 45 knots there in central Texas or north central Kansas or north central Texas. But looking towards Kansas and, of course, parts of Missouri and Iowa, we're still going to be seeing over 38 knots and possibly even near 42 knots at this point by 9 o'clock. And it's going to continue to increase by midnight here, but of course by midnight a lot of that potential will die off. It's going to still be very capped off in that shear, or sorry, in that cap. That cap's going to be very high. That cape's going to be very low at this point, so that those storms will all be limited at that point. But let's go ahead and check looking at this supercell composite parameter here. So measuring the probability of supercells here on a scale. So let's go ahead and look at 6 p.m. So by 6 p.m., you're probably noticing that our highest numbers will be towards Texas. And that's just the reason why we have numbers that high is because of the cape and the little cap we're seeing in that region, and as well all the variable conditions, including dew points, shear, and that's why there's some pretty big readings. Even though there's not going to be any rain in these areas tonight or this evening, they have very high supercell composite parameter numbers. That's just because all the conditions are so favorable that it's reading a very good chance for supercells with all those very good conditions and ingredients coming together. But there's not going to be any moisture within this area. But for those areas who are going to be seeing some moisture within the area tonight and this evening here, it's going to be areas like north central and central Kansas. We actually do have some numbers here. So in those areas where we actually may see some actual severe thunderstorm development, it's going to be, you can see these little numbers there, just over around a 10 there. So we actually have around 13 there in Minnesota. So really watching out for some minimal supercells up there. By tonight here, and you do see actually some 25s there, 30s, or nearly 30 on the supercell composite parameter number there in south central Kansas. That's just because of how favorable the conditions are. Because if you look at the cap, we're going to be seeing extremely high cap within this region here, and you're probably thinking, how is there very high numbers across these areas when they're not even a slight risk? And that's just because, of course, how favorable the conditions are. That's showing a very good chance for supercells. So in reality, we're not going to be seeing very high numbers like this. So you can kind of see we're going to be seeing more like 7s there, maybe some scattered 12 or 14s across north central Kansas. But again, it's not going to be this significant. It's not going to be all widespread like this, because if this were to be true, we'll be talking about enhanced or moderate at this moment. Same thing for the significant tornado parameter. We see some really good numbers here. Let me actually move my screen a little bit to the north. So you see some very good numbers here, starting off around 7 o'clock with already a 5 across northwestern Oklahoma. But northwestern Oklahoma, I don't even think they're kind of just outside the marginal risk. So they're not even really in a big risk for today, and that's just because the conditions are so favorable that they're reading extreme amounts of tornadoes and extreme probability for supercells, which obviously won't happen because it's all going to be capped out. So even with the very high amount of shear, even with the very high amount of cape and high dew points, they're reading, the models are saying, hey, this is going to be a really good outbreak. But little do they know, there's going to be a ton of cap, which is going to, I guess, prevent this main event from occurring. So if there was no cap, or if this was in May, this would be a big outbreak. But this is in April, early April, and we're seeing a ton of cap at the moment here. So this is all going to kind of be more limited towards, I guess, Kansas and Nebraska. And these are going to be the real numbers right here, like a 1 or a 3. Those are going to be the real numbers for today. We're not going to be seeing a 13 in northern Texas, when northern Texas isn't even at a marginal risk. So that's kind of showing you why these models are showing extreme outbreaks, and the SPC only has a slight risk. So the slight risk is perfect for today. So today's definitely going to be a lot less significant than what we're talking about for tomorrow. That's for sure. Let's go ahead and show you some examples here. So let's get later into tonight here. So we're going to be seeing some really high cap numbers there. Negative 26, 268 joules per kilogram there. So anything really over 150 is kind of on the edge of severe weather development. But anything over 200, there's definitely not going to be any big severe weather development. There could be, of course, like we're seeing there, maybe some severe thunderstorms within a small time frame. If the cap is lower in an area like this, like a 57, that's definitely variable for some severe weather development. But where we had that main slight risk there, you can kind of see 268 joules per kilogram, and that none. There's no risk here because it's all capped off right here. All this. Let me just get my red pen here. It's going to cap out right here. So it's going to be a pretty widespread amount of cap here. Even though we're seeing 1400 cape and we're seeing some pretty good lifted index numbers there, -5 there. So pretty unstable atmosphere. Even though we're seeing those pretty good numbers there, and even a 93 in the critical angle and a 78 on Slinky, you're probably thinking, oh, that's a pretty good standing. But again, there's a lot of cap within this region. Let's go ahead into Oklahoma, where we had that big numbers on the SCP and the STP. Look at that node. So it's all showing you how it's all going to cap out -52 there. 2,000 cape. 2,000 cape. Obviously, there's actually no shear within this region here, but there's lifted index -6. Pretty good there. Critical angle 116, Slinky 75 degrees. So this is not too shabby a reading, except the cap in the shear is going to be very low. Let's go now into Nebraska. We actually have that slight risk there, so we still have none, all going to cap out. But once we get a little bit into like almost midnight here, not almost midnight, but like 9 o'clock, that's when the cap will kind of calm down a little bit here. So we're going to start seeing maybe like 100s instead of 200s for some scattered areas. But of course, this area you see, there's no cap. But you're like, but of course, that's going to be obviously, these areas are going to be way too cold for some severe weather development. We're going to be seeing, of course, a big cold front there. And that's as well, we're going to be seeing some really dry atmosphere. So that's kind of just a little bit to the west of where we're watching for that severe weather. So let's go into the areas where we're actually watching for some severe weather. So let's go into like areas in southern Nebraska by almost like 9 o'clock. We're still seeing this capping out. Almost 1,600 cape. Seeing some very slight amount of shear, nothing too good. I mean, look at that photograph all over the place, 74 degrees on the Slinky. I mean, this is still not a good reading, but let's actually now go a little bit now more into tonight. So let's actually go back. So this is Tuesday. Let's go now towards Tuesday late night. So we're still seeing some pretty high numbers. Now let's go a little bit now near towards this, I don't know exactly the exact timing, but still late tonight. Then we're going to start getting that severe weather threat. Then we're going to start getting the cap's going to start really moving out here, and depending on the pressure, we're going to be seeing a low pressure reading of over 990 or 993. So if that's strong enough, some of this cap could very well shear off or wear off. So there is, like I said, there's going to be that small time frame where there could be some severe weather, some severe weather and maybe some scattered supercells there. And you're going to start seeing it now, getting a hazard of severe weather. So 1,700 cape, -43 there on cap, so very low there. Storm relativity is still on the lower side there, but the shear is still on the lower side. So this is going to be very minimal event here for southern Nebraska. Let's go down to central Kansas. Marginal severe. Getting a better reading on storm relative helicity, but still on the lower side. 1,900 cape, -47 on cap. 80 degree and 53 degree dew points, so that's a little bit on the lower side for dew points here. But let's now go later now into areas where we have the slight risk, like northeastern Kansas, -23 cap by tonight, late tonight. Severe weather threat there. Photographs all over the place. Like I did say, this won't be a tornadic event. 86 in the critical angle. That's very good. Actually, nearly 90 degrees, or nearly 90 in the critical angle. 78 on the Slinky. Of course, that's. I mean, it's gotta kind of look like a C there, but that's not looking like a C. You kind of want to see like a C structure for that. If you see like a C, that's gonna be pretty significant. And we're still seeing on the lower side for storm relative helicity. We're still seeing some pretty good cape. So cape's pretty good there. Let's go a little bit now to southeastern Kansas again. We're still looking at for some very small time frames for some severe weather. So again, it won't be extremely significant. We will start to see some marginal severe weather threats, but storm relative helicity based on this is going to be on a little bit on the lower side. And then once we get to Wednesday overnight, that's going to kind of be the dead zone, that's when things are going to go downhill. So once we get past midnight, things are going to go very downhill. When I mean downhill, I mean no severe weather at all. It's going to really die off. Cape's going to die off by that point. So I guess it's going to get a lot higher. You guys see, it's going to get a lot higher overnight once we get past midnight. So we have a very small door frame between 8, maybe 10 o'clock to have some severe weather once the cap starts to wear off a little bit because of the low pressure status. Now let's go ahead and talk about tomorrow's event here. Tomorrow's definitely going to be a lot more significant for those who are questioning the title. Which one can be more significant? Well, it's obviously going to be Wednesday here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the reasoning here. So first we're going to be looking at the composite reflectivity here, looking at very detailed. Take a look at the decibels. It's going to be seeing some lower side there. It's going to be 4 o'clock. So at 4 o'clock, we're going to start seeing these thunderstorms starting to become a little bit on the severe side, but really won't be extremely severe. So of course the evening hours. Once we get to around maybe I say 7 o'clock, that's when things are gonna get a little bit crazier. So south central Arkansas and northern Louisiana be keeping a close eye on these areas, as well as some scattered, maybe smaller supercells to develop across eastern Arkansas and making their way into Mississippi. And Tennessee is going to be the big threat there. By 9 o'clock here, you can see these little scattered, maybe small supercells developing across Louisiana, Arkansas. Of course, in this time frame, or in this event, we're missing very little cap, so there's not going to be any limiting factors really at this point. And then by midnight, it's going to all become, I guess, one large QLCS, as we do have a kind of cold front towards the west here, so it's going to be kind of forming like cold front there. And that's going to bring that widespread, that's going to be the reasoning for that widespread wind and hail threat. And of course, even to watch out for some severe weather main day on Thursday evening, possibly could bring some severe weather, but keeping a close eye on that. But see, Arkansas there, even the tip of Texas may see some small severe weather. Northern Louisiana, east or western Tennessee, western Mississippi, and as well eastern and southern Arkansas are going to be main areas, I guess, to watch out for. But again, we're starting to be seeing some pretty maybe some small severe thunderstorms making their way towards Missouri there, even as well into Illinois. So going to watch out for a pretty widespread severe weather threat here. But of course, not going to be anything crazy outside of that slight risk here. And maybe if there is an enhanced risk, there could very well be an enhanced risk to be issued here. Looking at the surface-based CAPE here, so getting to around 5 o'clock, just about, I guess, say an hour or so before the main event, these main severe thunderstorms starting to blow up here. We're going to start seeing some pretty good CAPE here, actually getting nearly 2,000 joules per kilogram, so it's a lot lower than today's event. Today's event may get 3,000 joules per kilogram, but of course, the cap is I guess cap is the deciding factor here. Could you get severe weather, or will you just bust? That's kind of what it's saying here. So obviously today there's gonna be a ton of cap. But tomorrow, there's going to be very little cap once we get towards the main time frame for severe weather here. But so going to be seeing some pretty good CAPE values across some areas here. But getting toward, I guess, 8 o'clock, still some pretty widespread 1,000 joules per kilogram to possibly as high as maybe 1,800, 1,700. That's not on the, I guess, higher side, but still favorable for some severe weather development. That's why tomorrow won't be extreme outbreak or severe weather outbreak or tornado outbreak. There will also be some scattered tornadoes and some scattered supercells, a lot more frequent supercells than today, but still not going to be extremely significant here. But getting to around 6 o'clock here, looking at the supercell composite parameter, we're actually getting some pretty good numbers here, up to a 15 there. In north central Louisiana, some widespread double digits there across the Mississippi region. But as we now get to around 10 o'clock here, that's when we get our highest rating up to a 23 there, right on the Mississippi River border, Mississippi and Arkansas. So that's going to be the main area to possibly watch out if there's an enhanced risk for that region. And of course, it'll die off once we get past midnight. Looking at the significant tornado parameter here as well, getting to, I believe, around 4 o'clock, we're starting to be seeing some widespread 4s or 6s there. But that still, of course, really won't be that concerning until we really get towards the main event around 9 o'clock here, getting up to a 7 there. Across Arkansas, some widespread 5s and 6s there across the Mississippi River Basin and rivers. So kind of right on that river is where we're going to be watching the pretty big event, and then getting nearly actually over a 7 across western Mississippi there. And they're going to get nearly almost an 8 there as it continues throughout Mississippi. So going to keep a close eye on Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana for sure. Maybe the main states to get affected. And of course, as we get past midnight, we'll die off. Looking at the 500 millibar height and as well wind speed, going to see a ton of shear within this each region here by 7 o'clock. Going to get well over possibly 60 to 68 knots there, and even possibly even 40 to even actually possibly over 60 knots once we get into the areas we're watching right here. Over 60 knots in the atmosphere. But let's go towards the surface here. Looking at the surface, we're going to be seeing some really nice amount of shear, possibly well over 50 knots of shear on the or just outside the surface here. So going to be seeing some really, really nice amount of shear in this event for sure. And we're going to be seeing really high amounts of relative humidity getting near the 70s here. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. So to answer this question here, tomorrow's event's going to definitely be more significant and even enhanced as possible. Today's event not going to be too crazy, but there still will be a time frame and a time frame and a corridor, a little small event where it could possibly, blow up across Nebraska and Kansas, and even some scattered storms up into the Midwest. So still watching for today, and I will be live streaming most likely by this evening here, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.